So hello everyone. Welcome to West East, Bi-Coastal Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond. I'm Susana Case, and I'd like to introduce the other three co-hosts who can put their hand up: Lynn McGee, and Bill Mohr, and Carolyn Wright. Okay. So everyone is muted during the reading, except obviously the person who is doing the reading. And we are recording. If you don't want to be recorded, you can turn off your video if you want to do that for privacy. I'd just like to point out the chat column. You can find that at the bottom of the screen, and we're going to use that to post the poets' bios and links to buy their books. And you can also post comments there, because the poets love reading these afterwards, although they can be distracting to try to read while you're doing your reading. I've tried to do that sometimes, and I ended up stumbling over my reading. So I think it's fine for us all to have our videos on. And for those of you on the West Coast, we have been watching the fires, and our hearts go out to you. And I hope we're not getting too much fire and too much smoke near you or near the people that you love. So we're going to start with Robin Myers. We have four great poets today, and Bill is going to introduce Robin. I'm going to show a picture of her latest book cover, and Lynn is going to post her bio in the chat column with links to her book. And we'll be taking turns, the four of us, doing these kinds of things for each of the poets in turn. The order in which we're going to read is Robin Myers, Tina Kane, Anthony Seidman, and Allison Blevins, just so you know to be prepared. So Lynn, Bill, I'm going to unmute you. Okay.
Hello. While there has been a growing interest in the United States since World War II in poets writing in other languages, poets in this country only occasionally ask themselves why poets in other countries would want to translate their work into other languages. It's part of the privileging of US post-colonial hegemony. I choose two of the four readers today as a matching pair of poet translators who have in fact had their own work translated into other languages. The first of this pair, Robin Myers, writes a lyric of philosophical poignancy in which the intensity of her vision shifts the burden of our solitary consciousness away from the quotidian centers of gravitas and rebalances the distresses so that we can accommodate the possibility of magnified perception. Even as she acknowledges that, quote, everything is straining on its axis, the dense world pulling in unforeseen directions, unquote. She also reminds us that, quote, what memory wants is not permanence per se, but relevance, permanently, unquote. Robin Myers' poems are part of what is permanently relevant to my sense of what is needed in American poetry now. That is, poems worthy of being translated into other languages. I present to you Robin Myers.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you as well, Susana and Lynn, for inviting me to be part of this series. It's very moving to me, and I'm so grateful to everyone who's here. It seems that this is truly one of the things that we can do together at the moment, and I'm just very grateful to all of you. I am going to read some poems of my own and to finish with a couple of translations, which I'll say about at the end. And rather than saying too much other than expressing my gratitude once again, I think I'll just get right to it. This first poem is called Late Stirrings. An urban introvert in late end-stage capitalism, she sometimes forgot she was part of a community until something terrible happened to it. The once glimpsed friend of friends who died of cancer young. A quake in the earth under her adoptive city when she wasn't there to see her neighbors register the rubble and weep with them. Inconceivable fires in the inconceivable green, all visible inconceivably from space. Each time, the reminder of this intimacy came at first like a shiver, like a diagnosis, or like music. The filaments flickered. Living alone for the first time, she'd walk to the market and make promises in her head. I will not think I am better than I am. I will ache and fear because there is hurt and fear to be felt. I will buy my apples from this old woman for the rest of my life, or at least from the rest of hers. Because she had so rarely placed her body on the street among thousands of other bodies, had never driven a truck into the wire fence of a detention facility, had not sworn off the machines that carried her periodically back to her family, soaring through the actual perishable air. This poem comes with a sort of unfinished dedication to an Australian journalist who wrote a series of articles for The Guardian at the end of last year and early this year about the experience of being pregnant and then miscarrying during the fires that were ravaging Australia. A shaft of light with dust in it. I am a child and think the light has made the dust. That dust is bodiless without it. It's bodiless, all right, but everywhere, and everywhere expands. A seething air, the substrates churned, words hounded, smoked out of their dwellings. We are, it seems, more mesh than vessel, a cloth that breathes the stuff of worlds unsafe for us to drink. I always hoped to trust this porousness, wanted my skin a cipher for the broom of human hurt and wasted time, our designs on surfaces of magnitudes we should respect. I take my longing back, or wish I could. You are, like me, like all of us, I'd like to think, before our own extrapolation into numbers, thaw and diesel, clocks and watersheds, a window gleam, the opposite of shadow, a way to make some fellow matter visible. And I, a child, reach out my hand to touch you, you who are not what you harbor, but in whose form it shines. Vermont. The shadowed snow is as blue and strange as if it's never heard a song about itself, and Mohr is ashing its way in over the mountain. We can see it. The light visits us for a little while. It's cold in a way that would kill you if you let it. Firs rise up animal and resplendent among the whittled down. So much organism grows back in the spring. Where does it keep itself? How does it trust itself to survive? In other lives, I wait tables in Arizona. I have leukemia. I'm cruel to my neighbors. I love a woman. I swim laps every day. In some life or other, I'm patient. I snow. This is the last of the poems of my own that I'll read before a couple of brief translations. A loudspeaker at the top of the hill trumpets daily bulletins from the town announcer. The bakery down the street has this and that kind of bread, and please remember not to park in front of the elementary school tomorrow on account of the parade. He sounds as proud as a mayor assessing the moral fiber of contestants in a beauty pageant, and pauses between dispatches to play snippets of brass band polkas. We're told that the announcer despised this country's most famous artist, who founded an institute in the old factory up the road and visited often until he died last week. Once, they say, he even hurled a rock at the maestro in the heat of a squabble. Speaking of death, a guy I knew had an accident yesterday, a poet and purveyor of orchids, and his face keeps pulsing into my senses. Alive, not alive, alive, not alive, steady as a church bell. I once went to a party at his house on someone else's invitation. When I arrived, the aproned host grinned from the threshold. Who are you and why are you here? Before ushering out the eggplant, bearing down on the wine, and crooning to his little black pug. Last night in a dream, I did a bad thing and was punished. My vision faded to snow fog, and I found myself trudging the rim of a highway to faint music. It surprised me that death was nothing but a timorous forward march without much scenery to speak of, or muscle aches, or even boredom, solitary except for the music, which was nondescript, as if beauty or menace or technique were all entirely beside the point. Then some kind of life hand pulled me back. I was distracted, unprepared, had proven myself unworthy of remaining dead, and returned me to where I was before, whether because I'd been forgiven or for some other consequence I was still designed to suffer, I couldn't be sure, but I understood that this uncertainty was what it meant for me to live. Today, the view from the hilltop is almost oceanic, a reverent exhalation of blue mountains and their nearer, greener slopes, with clouds edging down to touch them, trees acute with orange and purple flowers, the musk of burning wood, dogs who visit us as we walk and then disappear down the ridge, bees throbbing in the warm cups of their food. I could speak less if I lived here, it feels like. I'll try speaking less today, I decide, as I step over a brook that darts its way down into what I haven't yet seen. The first of two brief translations I'll read is by the Mexican poet Isabel Zapata, and it's called Reasons Not to Step on Snails. Because they're both male and female at once, because their shells grow with them, because Apicius cooked them with fermented fish guts, because their slime erases wrinkles, because they take 3 hours to mate, because they have 20,000 microscopic teeth, because Pope Pius V declared them fish so Catholics could eat them during Lent, because their naps take all week long, because Leonardo da Vinci ate them with butter and parsley, because they walk with their bellies, because they crunch, because they love unrigidly. And to finish, thank you so much for listening. I want to especially thank Bill Mohr, who's been a dear friend and an important presence in my poetic life for many years now. Thank you, Bill. This is by the Argentine poet Claudia Massin, and it's a poem that I've reread many times for solace in recent months. The Frost. Anyone who's been hurt carries the damage with her, as if her task were to propagate it, print it onto anyone who comes too close. We are innocent in the face of it, as a frost is innocent of devastating the harvest. Its freeze was already there, inside it, like its need to fall. It waited, forging itself slowly in the sky, in the center of a silence we can't make sense of, for its time to shine, to transpire. How could you stand bearing such weight without the urge to unburden yourself, even if your outburst blighted the earth, houses, lives peaceably sustained in the labor of protecting the world, during long seasons divided between the months of planting and the months of yield? I pray for the might that can withstand catastrophe and remake what's been harmed as many times as necessary. And I pray for the damage that can't be helped, because whatever we give each other, be it sorrow or fear, comes from the same desire to heal and be healed. Thank you so much.
So I met Tina Kane through Poetry is Bread, which is her Facebook series. Many of you may know it, in which poets read for 15 or 20 minutes via recording, and then she posts these on Facebook and on other social media as well during the pandemic. Originally from New York City, Tina, as she said before, it now lives in Rhode Island, where she is the state poet. And she's also considers herself an activist poet, and I consider her one as well. She's now working on a vote video series in which different poets record a short video as to why they intend to vote and possibly who they intend to vote for. And you should see that on social media beginning later, I believe this month. She'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. So she often writes, as you'll see in her poems, to current happenings, and is also inspired by her experience growing up as an underprivileged Chinese American kid in Hell's Kitchen. So this is her recent book, body of work, and I'll turn it over now to Tina as soon as I can unmute her, or she can unmute herself.
Did I unmute myself?
Yes, you're good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is great. I love the fact that we're all in really, really different places all here.
We just need you a little louder, Tina.
Can you hear me now? Is that good? Okay. Okay. So just one thing. Beautiful reading Robin, and I really love snails now. It's like this newfound deep appreciation. So thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to read one poem from, this is really like my New York book called Once More with Feeling. I'm going to start with a poem from there, read a couple of poems from Body of Work, which is the cover that you just saw, and then I'm going to read some new work just to try it out and let you know about that. So this first poem is called Wish List. And I always say these are actual wishes of mine. Wish list. To be the Mary J. Blige of poetry. To come back as Peter O'Toole. To have Peter Falk expose his tender heart to you, as John Cassavetes would, make a monument to love of a fragile life, with a nervous tick, and strangers from a bar on the couch. To be a poet of the sea, pounding down each syllable till it resembles almost nothing but sound between lovers. To be an unscripted scene of oneself, have a teardrop tattoo inked beneath one eye, to practice right action and right speech, to summon a stiff drink on waking at the foot of a dune, to be a grain of sand in that dune, to be seen up close at maximum magnification, intricate and entirely plausible. Keeping with the New York City theme, this book, Once More with Feeling, has a series of poems called Minor History poems, and I'm going to read a minor history of police work. And there's a reference in this poem to a little girl named Diana, and she was the daughter of a man named Philando Castile, who was killed. He was shot by a police officer in his car a few years ago in Minnesota. So that's the reference there. A minor history of police work. I am trying now to live in a clear-headed tenderness, that I could afford to be disorganized, defiant, delinquent even back then when others could not, cannot still, maybe never will. I was a kid when the cops once tried to take me from my home to the station for my safety. I was several years older than Diana in that car, who watched a bullet wound bloom in the driver's seat on the screen cradled in her mother's palm. Her story now replaying as the blood expands like a hand around the young man's torso, over and over, a small shadow falling across his ripped white tank. Nothing so red as that fixed for a lifetime in my eye, until now. Nothing like that back then, until now. I see how memory serves may work for her, and I grieve. When I said I was safe, the cops didn't make me go. That I could not be forced, so rooted to the basement apartment that was my home. Not a car, but a room with bars on the window and a gate to the street. We didn't own a vehicle, didn't drive. My father was white, my mother was Chinese, and the police were nice to us, tried to break things up, though their very presence in our home meant broken. They let me stay. No one was speeding or failing to signal. After all, we were just failing in a loud and crazy time. And whatever else we couldn't afford, we could still afford to fail. We worked with what we had, and they let us. And then now I'm going to read a couple quotes from this book body of work, whose cover you just saw. And I'm going to read a poem called Luck, which is a curious notion I find the older I get. Luck. There was a time when I'd say things like, that shit broke, about a toaster I had or something in a story I had read, and the boy I'd be with would laugh and shake his head like he couldn't believe his luck, or some such feeling I still can't name, but which broke me a little all the same, the way we do at different times when we are young or not so young, how we cleave ourselves open to see inside, to find some luck in the story, to believe it. So I'm working on this new book called Dog Whistle, and a lot of the poems in the book are personal poems written with elements of political speech. So you might hear some of that in there. And this first poem I'm going to read is called Poem by a Person Called Woman. And just for context, the Orlando in the poem is a friend of mine, a Navajo poet named Orlando Wright. So that's the reference there, and I'll clear that up for you. Poem by a Person Called Woman. Ancient as math, bright as grass, I believe in rain as much as the next person called poet, as much as people called women in North Korea, trimming meadows with scissors, blade by blade. Not today, Satan proclaims the First Baptist Church on North Main, but it is Satan's day, and that's not me being pessimistic. That's the sexy handmade Halloween costume talking. Vichy France with tits, double agent of the patriarchy Kim Kardashian, and her husband with his MAGA hat on the verge of mental collapse or world domination. That's Orlando, not the tragedy of Pulse, but the native tragedy of my friend's history and his early morning texts calling my coffee, which I have yet to drink, colonial and shit. A forced luxury like flour and bacon. I hear you, I say. I have to make my kids colonial pancakes. Today, we don't exist at all, he says. We will always die and die. Even I, your so-called Kavanaugh world. Ain't I a woman? I want to know. Yeah, says Orlando. You're my homie. Year of the Murder Hornet, which, if you can recall, amid the incessant flow of information coming at us, murder hornets a few months ago were all the rage of fear. I have 3 kids, so they were like, the murder hornets are coming from Japan. So, we've gotten over that. We're on to new things every other second. But this is 2020, Year of the Murder Hornet. Year of the Murder Hornet. Year of the cloud of pollen that chased me to my car across the supermarket parking lot. Year I was overpowered by flowering magnolia petals in a windstorm while walking home. Year of the murder hornet and coronavirus and weather as a system that shaped each day in a way that felt different from the past. Year during which you understood how the neighborhood you grew up in shaped the way you say friend. How the word childhood is the start of a sentence that has no end until you aren't the one saying it anymore. Year of grown-ups with their gravity, making everything a question or a fragment depending on their personal weather, whether some of them were green or deep as trees of your imagining. Year when the way trees speak with each other about each other was more essential than the shade they gave. Year to try to live like trees, upright, yielding, seeking sunlight in silent languages. Year I got a book in the mail about house cleaning as a joke from another poet regarding a poem of mine about life being hard and people's constant quest on the internet to make things easier. Year the cover of the book read, Introducing Your Household Heroes, Regular Products with Multiple Abilities. How multiple abilities sounded more like an affliction than a capacity. Years of nights I lost sleep. Year my mind cradled me. And that poet is Mary Ruefle, who I have a correspondence with, and she likes this poem I have called Life Hacks, about life hacks I found on the internet from my daughter, who was really into life hacks on YouTube. And so she's always sending me these books about cleaning tips. It's just like a joke. So some of the poems in this book, Dog Whistle, have to do with some of the notes I took during the impeachment inquiry and the congressional hearings over the past couple of years. So this one is on hearsay, which was a big theme a while back, and it's called Other Kinds of Hearsay. One is the dying revelation kind, in which a father says to his daughter, I should have listened to you more. And as soon as it's out there, it becomes true, is recognized as truth, meaning we can move on. Thank God for plain speech, because I am in a purgatory of slang, as Tongo coined it, a jargon limbo, too old and too young for anyone to understand what in God's name I'm saying. Invoking God even has become a sign of my age. I use his name in vain now more than ever before. Plus, phrases like, I hear you, and right on, with genuine sincerity, making people look at me like I'm quaint. Is this a linguistic midlife crisis, or the excited utterance type of hearsay, accepted as containing truth due to spontaneous emotion, which it does entail because I'm nothing if not excited and uttering things for which I am learning not to apologize, sometimes twice even, which is different from double hearsay, meaning hearsay within hearsay, like wheels within wheels, a sort of emotional telephone, generally considered unreliable. Whereas my kind of hearsay is so reliable, you will hear me when I say it's true. Ukraine of my imagination. So if you'll recall, Ukraine was big in the news, went away. But Mariana Ivanovich was the ambassador of Ukraine, and at some point Donald Trump intimated that intimated a threat by saying she could go through some things, if she didn't fall into line. So that's the reference here. Ukraine of my imagination. I was going through some things, a cache of love letters, old impulse control paperwork, gum wrappers, and a mint that tasted like keys. I was wearing my flavor-blasted sunglasses and gazing at the skyline of flame in defiance of nightfall. I was recalling the fact that ash makes the most glorious sunsets, something I once read in a science journal in the waiting room at the dentist. A piece of information so ephemeral and alive with possibility it corresponded with my subconscious, primordial and sweet as American crude. But I wasn't in the mood to go that deep, if only to keep grief at bay. Sometimes we say what we say because the earth is giving up on us, and we know it. Sometimes I say what I say because I'm not ready to give in. Treatise on my mouth for Fiona Hill. Turns out I am chargé d'affaires of my own mouth, of my real speech, though I sometimes think I am just being emotionally concise, that my use of constraint is not about protecting my own interests, but instead entail purity or poetry. But we'll let your mouth be the judge of that. I am sure there's a test or an app. I should probably ask my kids, for whom my policy is to never be alarmist, but rather to appear as a witness to our lives, so that I can tell them what they were like when they were little. To be a regular channel, oops, sorry, I lost the second page. I lost the second page of that poem. I'll get back to it. It's to be a regular channel of something. And anyway, okay. So sorry about that. I have a bunch of essay poems in this book, and I really like the writer Lydia Davis, and I have this like 300-page book of essays that she wrote, and I'm intrigued by her brevity, and so I thought about essay as a form in poems. So I'm just going to read one of these before I wrap up with a last poem. And this references an essay, a really hilarious but great essay that I read in the Paris Review a while back called Fuck the Bread. Essay on Beauty, or Behold a True Story. There once was a man who claimed he couldn't watch Bonnie and Clyde because Faye Dunaway was too beautiful. It's true, beauty hurts, but it's seldom debilitating. Overrated maybe the way Meryl Streep is overrated in the eyes of a man who doesn't find her beautiful enough. Fuck the bread, a writer's mother once said when her daughter couldn't find a teaching job or yeast during a pandemic. The bread is over, she told her, dismissing life as we knew it in one fell swoop. Bread became language to my mind, no longer elastic in form, all leavening lost, as bread became love to my heart, a knot of needing and need. Another true story is that I am a mother and a writer who knows about beauty and bread, about language and interruption. I also know the mirror only tells part of the story of a face. The eyes have it, they say, but the eyes can only hold so much. The way a heart can be full and at the same time broken. Different chambers of a single system split. The way Faye Dunaway kills beauty by being the mother of it. How we break bread to partake of it. And I'm going to read one last poem. This is one of my favorite poems that I've written because it's about one of my favorite people in the world, who's my youngest son, Titian. And he's 10 years old now, but when he was little, he used to ask, like, where was I before I was here? And we would say he was naked and flying around in the sky. And so this is a poem about that. And there's also a reference to Trayvon Martin in this poem. And a phrase that I borrow from a Danez Smith poem, go out for sweets and come back. Youngest son. We used to laugh and say he was naked and flying around with the stars before he came down to be with us. These days, he says, when I was dead, because naked means sexy and he's not a baby, knows what sex is, would rather be dead. But I don't want the word dead around my kids or around any mother's son, so I say, honey, you were never dead. And he says, then I fell like a raindrop into your mouth. And I say yes. How the other morning I said yes when he called fog a cloud on the ground. How he is formed, is forming from rain in my mouth, just as one day I believe he will go out for sweets and come back, just like that. For some boys like him, it may be that easy to not be a cloud called back to its rain place, for salt tears not to fill the space left in his wake. Thank you. Thanks. Sorry about that other poem where I lost the page.
Bill? Are you going to introduce
Yeah.
Anthony?
Okay, thank you. All right, I wasn't sure if you were going to say something. Hello. Yes, the next poet is Anthony Seidman. Thank you. The second poet translator today, Anthony Seidman, does not engage in the usual surrealist transformations in which the familiar becomes unfamiliar. Rather, he undertakes to make unfamiliar associations even more unfamiliar. This is the borderlands of imaginative consciousness that a poet can inhabit only by accepting the surrealistic cartography that the poem delineates in its unfolding. What especially impresses me about his work is the way that even his older poems retain their imprint on the present moment. Here, for example, is a portion of his vision in a poem from 10 years ago called Two Allegiances. These foothills, Chaparral, are my country, these gas stations. California, veiled in black, passes by holding a bloody carnation. Rimbaud declared in A Season in Hell, spiritual combat is as harrowing as physical combat. In a poem such as Border Town Graduates, Seidman confirms the transmogrifying encounters that await anyone seeking the rewards of liminal enchantment. Quote, our moon was a pile of bones, and our sun a blazing spider. When thirsty, we savored the taste of her venom, drunk hot, unquote. Indeed, on the West Coast right now, the sun is a blazing spider. I hope we can find some brief respite in the work of the next poet, Anthony Seidman.
Anthony, can you unmute yourself?
No? No, you cannot hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Ah, perfect. Okay. Thank you. Bill, those words are really moving. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for everyone who is involved in this. I'm going to start with some translations. I'm going to start with translations of a poet named Salvador Novo, who I think is a very important poet from Mexico from the early 20th century, who is kind of overlooked. But I was lucky enough to do a translation of his work in collaboration with the poet David Shook. And I think what's so moving about his work is that he will do these persona poems from a point of view that is, it's not his point of view. This is a poem called Epifania. Of course, Epiphany is the name. And this is from a very interesting type of persona poem that I translated by Salvador Novo, Epifania. One Sunday, Epifania didn't return home. I eavesdropped as they spoke of some man who had taken her. Later, by pestering the maids, I learned that he had brought her to a room. I never found out where this room was located, but I imagined it, cold, unfurnished, with a floor of clayish earth and a single door opening to the street. When I thought of that room, I couldn't see anyone there. Epifania returned one evening, and I chased her throughout the garden, begging for her to tell me what the man had done to her, because my room was empty, like a box containing no surprise. Epifania would laugh and run off. Then she finally opened the door and she let the street enter the garden. So that's from Novo's, one of his first books called 20 Poemas, 20 Poems, which I think is particularly beautiful. And I'll juxtapose it with another poem that's completely different, where we see how Salvador Novo was also working with surrealism, and not just with these type of persona poems. And the persona poem that I mentioned, Epifania, I think makes one think a lot about someone like Carl Sandburg, who is not popular anymore, but he was a poet whom Salvador Novo translated. So at this time in the early 20s, Mexican poets from Mexico City were very well aware of what was going on in the United States with regards to the developments of poetry. So here's a more comical poem by Salvador Novo. Voyage. The cacti stick out their tongues at us. The cornfields in their rows with forelocks poorly trimmed and notebooks tucked under their arms wave to us with tattered sleeves. The agave plants do 500 jumping jacks in the background, and the sun, an undercover cop who chucks a stone and then slips his hand in back pocket, reports on our unlikely escape via the meadow's magic lantern. We'll take our revenge on the night by lighting the street lamps and chopping down the forests. Some tree or other wishes to teach us a class on philology. Clouds, the quality control inspectors of monuments, remove the scale models enveloping mountains. So now, who would like to play a tennis match with cactus ears, prickly pear, and telegraph wires? Later, we'll take a Turkish bath in some hut lost in the Sierras. A rainbow shower will suit us fine, and then we will dry ourselves with some stratus. And that's called Voyage by Salvador Novo. Recently, I was happy enough to translate poems by a Dominican poet who is more or less contemporary. He's our age. He was born in 1971. His name is Homero Pumarol. And I felt a great urgency to translate Dominican poet just because Dominican literature has always been considered to be on the periphery of what's considered more and more Latin American literature. We know a lot about Mexican poetry, Argentine poetry, and the irony is that the Dominican Republic has the oldest Western city in the Americas. Santo Domingo is where everything started, for better or for worse. So I just published with Sweeten Duivel a book called Caribbean Ants. It's poetry by Homero Pumarol. And just with a name like that, Homero, Homer, Pumarol, you know you have a great poet. I mean, just starting with a name like that, you can't go wrong. So I'm gonna read a couple poems by Homero Pumarol. And I think this one is particularly proper for our current political climate in the United States. This is called Popular Monday Movie. Popular Monday Movie. Results from the latest election. Results of the democracy. Busted sneakers, chicken bones sucked clean by a line of drunken strangers. And now turn on the television, the news, and light up one mother-in-law and two soap operas. Results from the latest election, results of the democracy. 3-day weekend, chucked stones and domino games, stray bullets, rationed rum and gasoline. National Guards in supermarkets, dawn to dusk curfew, fingers of cashiers in hot water. Results from the latest election, results of the democracy. And then I will give us one more poem by Homero Pumarol, and then I'll finish off with one of my own poems. This is called Caribbean Ants, and if no one has ever heard the term Sankey Pankies at the very end, this is the equivalent, I guess you can say, of a gigolo in the Dominican Republic who kind of seduce the local tourists, and you engage in kind of a mutual relationship for some kind of, I hope, bliss or some type of or mutual recognition. Caribbean Ants by Homero Pumarol, talking about his country, the Dominican Republic. One imagines the Caribbean, an ant swarm devouring the Antilles. And the Antilles is a bottle of different sizes conserving all of the world's rum. And the world is like a baseball soaring over the roofs of Boston. In Boston is the image that satellites transmit when Big Papi slowly jogs past second base, waving to the bleachers, caressing the infield with his cleats. And the cleats are skiffs made by Puma, carrying around 500,000 undocumented travelers, scoffing at the Gringo Coast Guard radars from Borinquin and back to Borinquin by way of Michigan or New York. And everyone has a cousin in the Mona Passage. And one Mona Island is a rooster used for training fighting cockerels. In Baibe Beach, for example, there's a cockerel discotheque where the cockerels dance beneath a disco ball and tourists dance with spurs while splattering feathers and blood. And the cockerels place bets on the tourists, and the tourists fall in love with the cockerels. And in the end, there's a dead cockerel or tourist, and a tourist gets married with the winning cockerel, which all has to do with enormous waves of skanky pankies sliding down the back of a European or gringo family, and with enormous waves of 1970s engines rising over highways of beans and rice, habichuelas y arroz, among Caribbean ants and bottles of rum. And then I will finish with a couple of poems of my new book called Cosmic Weather. Of course, this is of lesser quality than the work of the poets I just translated, whose work, I must admit, I had to transfer into English and thereby damage the poetry as well. But such is the case of the poet. Here we go. Oxygen Backwards. This is a poem from my new book. Oxygen Backwards. I am breathing from 2,000 years ago. I am exhaling a toothache, a scarab, a shekel. I am burping an earthquake tomorrow, while crocodile plunges into my sleep as I swim against adverbs like deliriously, agonizingly, exponentially. I unpeel words basted on the bones of genius, on the skulls that sniff airplane glue in lunar distensions, on the pollination of dwarf stars and comets strafing the hair of exuberance. Breathing oxygen backwards equals a birth into water, a wisp of eels from thermal vents, and verb elongates, couples with a shark, while the tentacles of jellyfish inscribe the word awaken on the seafloors of slumber. My nails keep growing, and my ears sniff the traffic as well as the molten nickel core of this planet, because I am breathing in preterite humanity, and the climate exhales something gooey and Jurassic. This, being alive past the half-life of carbon. This, sneezing inside I, like creating air without blueness. And then for my last poem that I must inflict upon you, I'll read this short poem called All the Sociolects, including Guerrilla. So all the sociolects, including Guerrilla. Some speak cobra, some speak crow, some hoot and monkey jabber, some twitter and fry, some constellate or snore in the pigsty. Some swig from the baboon bottle, or pin on chest a star, and sit on anthill and hear the meat trumpets blowing from afar. But no lexicon or code will subvert the dollar, overthrow the business tie, or emoliate the leathery generals who have invested in bombs and ring around the collar. No power lunch ends with roses. At best, there is hide and stab, or explosives in a bowl of Fruit Loops, or the match in a petrol cocktail, or silence. Eventually, the sun will bloat and blot out this stain, though humanity has done enough to botch its self-autopsy. There's no accounting for the scythe and hourglass. And still some speak cobra, some speak crow. Thank you. Merci. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so
That
much.
was really delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, you know, I've been to other reading series where they do this thing where they ask everyone to unmute themselves for just a second and then they clap for the poets. Do you guys want to do that? And or we can do that at the end, maybe? We'll do that at the end.
Yes, I'm for unmuting ourselves at the end so we can clap.
Okay. All right. All right. So thank you so much, Anthony Seidman. That was wonderful. It's my honor now. Yeah, that was really cool. It's my honor now to introduce Allison Blevins. I just want to point out to you that in the chat column, there's a more detailed bio with links to all the poets' work. And now you can see last up links to Allison's books and her bio. So some of us know Allison Blevins from her role as poetry editor at Literary Mama, a journal that features, in its words, the complexities of motherhood. I really love that journal, by the way. An important platform, especially now when so many caregivers are struggling at home with their children. In an interview, Allison says that what she looks for in submissions to Literary Mama is fresh language and unusual metaphors. I want to read a poem I've never read before. And I can tell you, if you've read her work, you could say, I've never read that poem before. You know, her work is very distinctive. Elijah Burrell says of the poems in Allison Blevins' 2019 chapbook, Susurration, they shepherd us through her speaker's innermost territories, their hillsides and ravines. We experience lust's undeniable electricity, the anguish of the abandoned, motherhood's trials. I personally love the high level of imagination in the work of Allison Blevins, as in her poem, Season 4, Episode 11, Delivering Baby Mason. Quote from the poem, I am watching a woman pull her own child from her body. I can't believe he's all mine. Woman folds and folds into squares, into herself, disappears. I am a kitchen yellowed tile, bacon, butter, and splatter. I am stink and vinegar sting. I never gave birth, but I believe that is exactly what it's like. This poem is inspired by the work, this book is inspired, this poem in itself is inspired by the work of Italian painter Gino Severini. And Allison Blevins' 2019 collection, Letters to Joan. In that book, the ekphrastic poems pay homage to Joan Mitchell, the mid-century American abstract expressionist painter. Quote, "The shimmering poems in Letters to Joan seem caught between worlds, one filled with instructions and imperatives, the other incantatory and strange." That's Alan Michael Parker. Personally, I've ordered Letters to Joan and I can't wait to get it. And I really encourage you to order Letters to Joan, order the poet's books. There are easy links in the chat column for you to do that. And it's just so important. I just want to put in a plug here for the small presses of the world. You know, we rely on them so much, and, you know, we complain about them. They don't do any promotion, that, you know, it's like we all have, but, you know, I love them, and without them, we wouldn't hear a lot of this incredible work that we're hearing today. So I really, really encourage you to order the poet's books. Order Allison's book. I can't wait to get it. Letters to Joan. Please welcome Allison Blevins.
Thank you. Just thank you so much to the organizers, Bill, Carolyn, Lynn, and Susana. And also, I'm frankly just thrilled to be in such good reading company tonight. Very impressed with everyone. I'm going to start with a new poem. In October, I slowly lost feeling in both of my legs, and I spent several months learning to walk again, and was later diagnosed with MS. And this poem is about that experience. It's probably helpful to know that the word paresthesia means like a weird feelings, you know, something feels like it shouldn't feel. And the word spasticity is the feeling of your muscles tightening to the point that they don't work anymore. This is a long prose poem, so even when you think it's over, it's not over. It's going to keep going. The title of the poem is Slowly Suddenly. The epigraph is from the National MS Society, and it reads, "The most common symptoms of MS include fatigue, numbness and tingling, blurred vision, double vision, weakness, poor coordination, imbalance, pain, depression, and problems with memory and concentration. Less commonly, MS may cause tremor, paralysis, and blindness." Slowly, suddenly. I won't sleep for the risk of waking. Wrapped in an ever-tightening band, I can't stop redefining the word nostalgia. After diagnosis, every word requires reimagining. How I live in the memory of movement, a fluid swimmer, live in the amazement of first wheel builders. How to explain paralysis that creeps into the calves and thighs and hips. The brain insists nothing can be said on this experience. I'm afraid to sleep. When I wake, I'll remember my body is laying motionless in this bed. Paresthesia. Heat is sharp, water is paper, and the weight of you like a blanket on my legs crushes the air from my lungs. Trace your finger up the inside of my thigh. I am wet. Not like before, not how you think or remember, but the wet of ice in the bath. Cold, sudden blue. The higher you touch, the more anticipation is replaced by fear. I'm writing a novel in my head, on my hands actually. My left thumb taps out code now on its own, independent. I can read dots and dashes now. I know I'll have to translate language for you eventually. This is all going to confuse. I suppose I need to get past that confusion. I'm high on codeine and Xanax. This isn't an excuse. It's best to be honest. One helps me sit still in this shell, crystalline and lead. The other keeps tears from turning ugly. Red bird on a white bone branch. All the branches swing, catch like hairs in a sudden drafting wind, northern, awkward, toward some blankness even I can see from the window. Imagine laying beneath this chaos, how wood moves while rooted in the solid shifting solids beneath you, how everything is frozen but dancing white and glowing, how you might feel your arm reach slowly up and up into some empty space waiting above you. Like children and waistlines, leaves resist managing, and the parking lot branches are nearly bare. I can't ever remember when leaves are time to fall. This is the straggling time. Worse than the naked brown, I'm embarrassed for the trees. Not for their exposure. What woman could dare refuse empathy for their spreading? How hands creep and slide and dip, persistent into every secret burrow. Stripped by wind and watched by passerby, we know how to imagine that. In this place, I memorize new refrains. What is happening to your body isn't happening to your body. I'm embarrassed by the gratitude of trees. How must it feel to let go over and over? How lucky the bloom and return, the sweet blossom and breeze as if purple and blue were a current of traveling breath looking for home. I can do anything for 15 minutes. How might fuchsia settle to rest on my open arms? Green, unbreakable green come to rest in my marrow. Inside this hospital room, I'm embarrassed for gratitude, the grandeur of my hope. In the electric pain, the black, black center of the pain is a silence I can't explain to you now. I won't ever know how to say silence, stripped naked in the glass, entered my room. This is how the numb lightning spread from my big toe to my belly, wrapped and caressed my body, slowly and suddenly. I can't explain how I want to put it all in my mouth, the children's fingers, dirt under their nails, my wife's ears, how she hates when I tongue the stink from her neck. Now I shuffle to the car, shuffle down the hall, shuffle to the mail, invisible while everyone looks at me. Spasticity, you are the love I've always known. How something in living and living female tells you this will one day come for you. Disaster and the sound of something legged and humming that advances and recedes as liquid on the ground. I want to join their cult of gratitude. I want my face and teeth and hair to glow with the gratitude other women seem to feel for just not being dead. It could be worse, I quip to an acquaintance who can't even bring herself to stop when she asks and brushes by me on the sidewalk. What I like about murder is the absence of language. To live in the chaos, for a moment, nothing. So I watch only true crime and never leave my bed. No manual or explanation exists for infanticide, any violence done to anybody. The family annihilator, the angel of death, the sadist, the blitz. I can be them and not them, put my body in the emotionless body holding the knife, the pick or hatchet, a splintered jar inside a jar. When the more famous than me poet asks if I'm pregnant, it is difficult to stop myself from screaming. I smile. I'm only a few weeks walking again without the cane, 15 pounds heavier from steroids. The brain is meant to scream. If any of you speak and I forget to respond, imagine my scream, silent and piercing as a toddler buckled into a stationary car. The next poem I'm going to read comes from my book, Letters to Joan. And these, like was said before, they're all ekphrastic poems. And Joan Mitchell, for, oh my gosh, years and years and years, has been an obsession of mine. And if you're interested, you should look up the Joan Mitchell Foundation, and you can take a look at her paintings. This one is based on a 1951 painting called Cross Section of a Bridge. Imagine a God. Imagine you are halfway to something like gravel suspended in the shallows of a stalled waterway. Imagine a bridge. Imagine a deer roadside. Imagine a hen trapped inside a scaled mass that constricts and slacks. Imagine a child waiting like a leaf or gum wrapper outside a store. Imagine a God must see creation this way, as travelers who've forgotten the thrill of movement, frozen in an always cresting ocean, always white, always frothing, always the breath between wax and wane, always the bend, the winding approach. We are lights always blinking. And my last poem is from my book, Susurration, and it feels once again timely and relevant, and that is unfortunate. After the inauguration, everything is portentous. I think about absolutes of motion when I'm naked, how a pendulum swings, how a scale unbalanced must wobble, how my skin ripples, weight unsteadies. Something alive is buzzing in the kitchen, leg against leg, string against bow, like the sound of nothing, boxed and electrified. Blackness circles of the sky above my son's school most afternoons. I want to say blackness as if dawn or waking from sleep or blood rising to air were sinister, but the feeling on my skin is more like dust, fine and granular, settling even in my throat. I could say the circling and flapping and cawing will alight as sediment in the corners in the morning after God has closed the eyes, after God has opened them again. Because my children don't notice my body unclothed when I walk naked, I am emperor. I parade the living room, parade this boulevard of blind children. The images we steep in are invisible. On the playground at my son's school, children in puffed and quilted jackets gather and ring around a solitary boy. The children silent, the boy's mouth buzzes, all the feathers, dark and rustling, fall from above. That's it.
Okay.
We can all unmute each other, not each other, ourselves, so that we can applaud all four poets. And
Yay.
so
Okay, there we go.
much all of you.
Thank you, everybody. That was wonderful.
Robin Myers, Anthony Seidman, Tina
Thank you so much.
Allison.
Thank you.
I'm going to post everyone's links to their books right now at the end, so it's also at the end. So
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah, no, we've been doing it
Thank
throughout,
you so much.
and yeah.
And will the chat link, will the chat thread also remain in some way, or
If
does
you,
that go away?
it goes away, but if you see the 3 dots at the bottom right of it, if you click on that, you can, you will pop up saying save chat.
Oh, okay. So I'll wait till just about everything is posted.
Got it. I've saved it.
Oh,
Yes, and then when you
yeah,
go up, you'll see it. It's a I think it's an RTF file. You'll see
okay, great.
it on your desktop.
I want to buy a book
What it needs to
from
do is,
everybody for myself for my birthday.
Happy birthday.
ah,
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
when is your birthday?
Today.
Today.
Today? Oh, happy birthday. How wonderful.
It's
For
birthday.
my
How wonderful. Happy birthday.
I feel like I
Yeah.
needed more poetry books. This was a beautiful reading. Well,
This is
I
great.
saw Bill too. He's
Yeah.
and the hosts and everybody.
And I thought everybody's introductions were also wonderfully succinct, but, profound. And they got right to the point and were poetic in themselves.
Yeah,
So,
Thank you.
I agree with that.
Be introducing soon.
So Carolyn is just going to say a few words.
yes, thank you so much. I'm really, really pleased to be part of this reading series. This is my first time to be one of the hosts, and so I'm very glad to be here. I'm pleased, again, wonderfully gratified by the quality of the work. I feel very inspired by what I've heard today, and I hope you will be able to join us again in November. And so this is a series that has a reading every other month, which helps, gives us a little time in between to catch up or write some of the poems that have been inspired, write out some of the poems that have been inspired from this reading. We're going to be, as far as I understand, we've been contacting other poets for November, and the reading will be on November 15th, the Ides of November, and that, of course, also will be right after the election. So some of these readings, some of the poems that you wonderful poets read today are portentous. But our readers on November 15th will include Ellen Bass, Frank Gaspar, Bertha Rogers, and a third one. I've seen a few conversations and emails.
Jessica Greenbaum is the.
Jessica Greenbaum. Okay, I wasn't sure if she had confirmed or not. So those will be our 4 readers for November. And then the next reading after that will be in mid-January. Hopefully we will still have a republic, a country by then.
Finish that.
Yes. So thank you, everybody. And I'm really pleased to be part of this group. And, so thank you again, Susana, Lynn, and William for including me. And let us go forward and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday and the rest of this crazy voting season.